Good morning, everybody. Are we already asleep? Good morning, everybody. Good morning. There we go. Thank you very much. It's always an honor and a pleasure for me to spend a few minutes sharing part of my life. And please forgive my accent. As you can probably imagine, I was born in Jersey. No, actually, that's a joke. But at least everybody that comes and attends my stories always goes home and says, well, there was a funny dude up there on the stage that had a funny accent and talked with his hands. So I don't know if there are any Italian within the students. Ciao, parli italiano? Oh, shocker. Ah, okay. But anyway, so I would like to share with you what happened to me that really changed and marked my life prior of meeting the lady from Chicago that she was studying in Rome and became my wife, and with whom I had 5 children, 2 of them in college and 3 in the school that I now run, that my wife and myself started 5 years ago in New Hampshire. And as Ms. Stark said, I had the honor to be a Swiss guard and to serve a saint. And who is this saint? He was canonized on April 27th, and his name was Karol Joseph Wojtyła. Born on May 18, 1920 in Wadowice, Poland, he was baptized on June 20, 1920. John Paul's early life was marked by great loss. His mother died when he was 9, and his older brother Edmund died when he was 12. He had a sister also named Olga, but she had died before he was born, and she died in 1918. His father, instead, died when Karol was 21 years old. As a young student, he was thrilled by literature, by the theater, and poetry. Working in a chemical plant surrounded and threatened by the Nazi terror, Karol heard the voice of the Lord. Follow me, Karol. In this extraordinary setting, he began to read books of philosophy and theology, and then entered the clandestine seminary established by Cardinal Saffiera. After the war, he was able to complete his studies in the Faculty of Theology of the University of Krakow. How often, my dear students, in his letter to priests and in his autobiographical books, has he spoken to us about his priesthood, to which he was ordained on November 1st, 1946. In these texts, he interprets his priesthood with particularly reference to 3 saints of the Lord. First, and I quote John 15, "You did not choose me, but I chose you, and I appointed you to go and bear fruit." The second saying is, and I quote again from John 10, "The good shepherd lays down his life for the sheep." And then the third one, again from John 15, "As the Father has loved me, so I have loved you. Abide in my love." In these 3 sayings, we see the heart and soul of our Holy Father. He really went everywhere, untiringly, in order to bear fruit, fruit that lasts. "Rise, let us be on our way." With this word, he rose us from a lethargic faith. He rose me from my lukewarm faith. From the sleep of the disciples of both yesterday and today. The only Father was a priest to the last, for he offered his life to God for his flock and for the entire human family in a daily self-oblation for the service of the church, especially amid the sufferings of his final months. And in this way, he became one with Christ. Definitely, he became the good shepherd who loves his sheep. In July 1958, the young priest Karol Wojtyła began a new stage in his journey with the Lord and in the footsteps of the Lord. Karol had gone to the Missouri lakes for his usual vacation along with a group of young people who loved canoeing. But he brought with him a letter inviting him to call the Primate of Poland, Cardinal Wyszynski. He could guess the purpose of the meeting and the purpose of the letter. He was to be appointed as the auxiliary bishop of Krakow at the age of 38. Leaving the academic world, leaving this challenging engagement with young people, leaving the great intellectual endeavor of striving to understand and interpret the mystery of that creature, which is man, and of communicating to today's world the Christian interpretation of our being. All this must have seemed to him like losing his very self. Losing what had become the very human identity of this young priest. But guess what? He chose to serve the Lord. Karol Wojtyła accepted the appointment, for he heard in the church called the voice of Christ. And then he realized how true are the Lord's word, Luke 17, and I quote, "Those who try to make their life secure will lose it, but those who lose their life will keep it." Karol, and we all know this, never wanted to make his own life secure, to keep it for himself. He wanted to give of himself unreservedly to the very last moment for Christ, and thus also for us. And thus he came to experience how everything which he had given over into the Lord's hand came back to him in a new way. His love of words, his love of poetry, his love of literature became an essential part of his pastoral mission and gave new vitality, new urgency, new attractiveness to the preaching of the gospel, even when it is a sign of contradiction. In October 1978, Karol Wojtyła once again heard the voice of the Lord. "Karol, do you love me?" The Archbishop of Krakow answered from the depth of his heart, "Lord, you know everything. You know that I love you." The love of Christ, my dear friends, was the dominant force in the life of our beloved Holy Father. Anyone who ever saw him pray in real or in a TV screen, who ever heard him preach, knows that. thanks to his being profoundly rooted in Christ, he was able to bear a burden which transcends merely human abilities. That of being the shepherd of Christ's flock is universal church. Saint John Paul II was a man of prayer. The center of his life was founded on the Eucharist. His deep faith, his confidence in God's help in him, the crucial events of life, as well as the total surrender in the maternal help of the Blessed Virgin Mary, which manifested itself with particular intensity in moments of obscurity, as that of the tragic attack of the 1981, or during the hard road of the advancing illness. All of this was centered on the Eucharist. He always gave thanks and attributed to God every merit and good gift received. His first motto, "Do not be afraid. Open indeed, open wide the doors to Christ," pronounced during the opening celebration of his ministry on October 22nd, 1978, marked the program of his long pontificate, which has remained alive in the hearts of the faithful even after his death. Dear students, being Pope is not your average job. Trust me. If some of you here, of the boys, is thinking, "I'm going to be a Pope," well, you better change your mind. It's actually not technically a job, it's a vocation. You don't just decide to do it. You don't put your name on the fields along the street so that then people will vote for you. You are actually called to do it. Nor is being Pope an easy position. The world closely watches and analyzes every move the Pope makes, every word he speaks. Everyone judges the Pope based on his or her own perspective and agenda. I like him, I don't like him, I like him, I don't like him. Standing in the fisherman's shoes is all-consuming. My sense from having lived in the Vatican and of the cardinals who I met is that not one of them wants to be Pope. There isn't one cardinal that enters the conclave that had bought a one-way ticket. Absolutely none. A friend explained to me as a young Swiss guard that one of the reasons why popes change their names when assuming their ministry is that their previous life is over. As Jesus told Peter in John 21st, verses 18, and I quote, "will be taken where he does not wish to go." My experience of the pontificate of St. John Paul II reinforces that insight. Well, let me tell you how I decided to become a Swiss guard. Well, my mom is Italian, my dad Swiss. I was born in Italy because my dad had left Switzerland working for a pharmaceutical company and landed in Milan, which she saw in the 60s. We are, okay, so yes, I'm old, of course. And he married these ladies that he met in the cafe every day when he was going out for lunch. And a couple of years later, I was born, and I was raised in Milano, a big city, you know, the city of fashion, the capital of Europe, an industrial city. and I was the very sweet boy. My mom loved me so much that I started 3rd grade. I was 4.5 years old when I started 4th grade because my mom couldn't handle me anymore. And actually I was 4 years old and 10 months. And I went through the normal life that each of you is going through. I didn't have that. I didn't have that. We didn't have that. All right. So, but I did most of the silly things you do. And being in Italy, my goal in life was only one. I wanted to stay home until I was 38 and have my mom cook my meals and do my laundry because that's what everybody does in Italy. Why should I just go out there and get a job when I can live home for free? Who cares about doing a family? There is time for that. Koala bears live between 21 and 22 hours a day. I want to do the same. I want to be a koala bear. Well, in this picture, I totally forgot that my dad was Swiss, and my dad had the rank of colonel in the Swiss Army. Well, my dad was also, involved in chemistry right now as a pharmaceutical company. So after I went to university and graduate school, and when I defended my doctorate, my dad comes to me and he says, Mario, I'll give you 2 weeks to make up your mind. If you don't make up your mind, I'll tell you what to do. Yeah, you want to come and tell me what to do? So I decided to challenge my dad, and I decided to wait for 2 weeks. Well, my dad, after 2 weeks, precisely as every Swiss does, okay, with his bar of chocolate in his hand and his wallet on the other, okay, comes to me and says, 2 weeks are over. This is your choice, sis. Swiss Army, 17 weeks boot camps. Italian Army, 54 weeks boot camps. I had to think for a moment because I had a Swiss passport, but I was born in Italy. Therefore, I was Italian for the Italian and Swiss for the Swiss. But at that moment, because I had to choose one of those, I was going to renounce one of the passports. Because once you join an army, you cannot serve another country. And so, 17 weeks, 54 weeks, I can see the boys here in the first line, they already know what I chose, right? Well, when I chose 17 weeks of boot camps in Switzerland, my dad, left corner of his mouth went up a little, like a little laugh, but I didn't really catch it. Well, let me tell you, young kids, but this is probably for the faculty back there. The Swiss Army, they have a navy, for crying out loud. There is no ocean in Switzerland, and they have a navy. They have a big ship on the Constance Lake outside of Zurich to tell you how crazy they are with the army. And I had absolutely no idea. And so when I had to take the train and arrive in Geneva, and I thought, woohoo, Geneva, this is awesome, look at this. Well, they put me into a truck and took me for 2 hours up into the mountain, and I relived Goldfinger movie. There was a town within the mountain. I said, what the heck is going on here? I had to spend 17 weeks in a room with 36 men sleeping on a bunk bed that was triple, and unfortunately I ended up on the top, which meant I spent 17 weeks in an MRI because I couldn't turn left and right because the ceiling was right there. One day, I had it. I couldn't call mom home, and I wanted to do something. And I remember, wait a second, I'm a Roman Catholic. I can go to Mass. I'm going to go to Sunday Mass. Actually, I'm going to tell them that I'm going to go to Sunday Mass, and then I'm going to go down to Geneva. Off I go into the city for 4 or 5 hours. Back, yes, I went to Mass. And so I approached my lieutenant, and the lieutenant said, sure, absolutely no problem at all. You can go to Mass. So Sunday morning I'm there ready with my going outside uniform, and this major shows up. I said, oh boy, a major. I wanted a simple soldier to just take me down. I'd give him $10 and he will just keep his mouth shut. Now I have a major here and this is tough. Well, on the road there, on the drive there, a long drive, he barely talked to me. And I was, okay, I'm going to be able to get what I want here because this is going to be tough. Well, we arrived to the church of St. Martin the Tour, and I'm thinking, okay, he's going to drop me now, and instead of dropping me in the front of the church, this guy drives around, stops in front of the little door of the sacristy, gets off the car and tells me, come with me. And I said, wait a second, what the heck's going on? We go into the sacristy and this major starts taking his uniform off and starts putting the priest vestments on. And I said, what the heck's going on here? Well, I had no idea this gentleman, this major, was actually the chaplain. I didn't know how to read his things on his uniform, and he was a priest, and he was basically celebrating that Sunday morning 11:15 Mass. And instead of being in the city, I ended up being the altar server and the lecturer, and this was absolutely not what I had planned. On the way back, the temperature within the car was extremely high because I was very angry. And the major says, you know, Mario, I read your file. I find you a very interesting man. I think you should consider joining the Swiss Guard. Swiss Guard? Security service, guns, telling everybody what to do, but most especially gorgeous uniform in Rome, gazillions of phone numbers for every single girl I'm gonna meet. I'm in it! Tell me where I have to sign, I am going. Not even for 1 second, the Petrine ministry of the Swiss Guard to me was, I'm gonna be so cool. I'm gonna be a Swiss Guard. And so I joined the Swiss Guard without telling my parents. I left Geneva, I went home. I had 1 week, and when I arrived home, I entered. My father comes to me, you're gonna have 2 weeks before you make, already heard this story, and I said, Dad, time out. I already make up my decision. And my mom comes out from the kitchen, Italian lady, she had probably pappardelle in her hands, she was baking, whatever, okay? And she says, what are you gonna do? I'm going to the Vatican. My mom's pappardelle fell off her hands. She said, to the Vatican? Are you going to become a priest? He says, no, Mom, don't worry about it. I'm going to become a Swiss Guard. I'm going to become a bodyguard of the Pope. And my mom says, who's the Pope? And I said to her, well, I don't remember his name, but I'll make sure that when I get there, I'll tell you. To let you know how poor my faith and my involvement in the Catholic Church was. So I arrived at the Vatican as a young Swiss Guard with a largely secular understanding of Catholicism, which was my parents' faith, but not truly my own. This outsider view was both helpful and deceiving. In fact, I was able to meet Jean Paul without any preconceived notion. His impression of me was not filtered through my perception of his office, but purely based on a human level. The first time I met the Holy Father, I was about 1 month in the service. And usually you get to be introduced to the Holy Father. The protocol is such that you don't do that when he walks by, all right? You actually wait, and if he talks to you, then you answer back. But if he comes in front of you and he doesn't engage with you, you're not going to put your foot out. You know what I'm saying? Right? So, usually, there is a little ceremonial where the colonel introduces the new guards to the Holy Father. But I was the only one, and so there wasn't really a specific moment. So that Saturday afternoon, I was in a place within the Apostolic Palace, and all of a sudden they tell me by radio, secure the place, close all the doors, according to protocol, the Holy Father is walking by. And so I do, and then I go into my attention and I stay there in the corner. And when the Holy Father arrives, and he was with his personal secretary, I did not talk. He walked by, and then he stopped, and he came back to me. He looked up, and I'm still in my attention position, and he looked up and he says, "You must be the new one." And that was enough for me. And I came down from my attention and I went there. "Yes, Holy Father, my name is Mario Enzler," and I said probably like, I don't know, 200 words in 15 seconds. And he looked at me and he says, "Well, thank you for giving up your life for me." And when he said that, he shocked. I hadn't thought that. I wasn't actually really thinking that when you become a Swiss Guard, you do a oath of fidelity such that you're willing to give up your life for the Holy Father. So that day, I felt uncomfortable. And I felt like, did I do the right thing here? Because, you know, I want to live as long as 120. So if they already shot this guy, if they're going to try to shoot the guy again, well, I was really feeling a little bit uncomfortable. But in the back, the Swiss Guard are a symbol of fidelity. For more than 500 years, the Sons of Switzerland have served the Church by protecting the Sommo Pontifice, the Supreme Pontiff, in good times and in bad times. Under the blood of 150 guards who sacrificed their lives protecting Pope Julius II from invading Landsknecht barbarians in 1527, this military corps continues the noble of service as defensores libertatis ecclesia, protectors of the freedom of the Church. John Paul II once told to his secretary in front of me that he had been inspired by God to change the way he led the Church. He said something along this: "I must lead the Church with suffering. The Pope must suffer so that every family in the world should see that there is a higher gospel. The gospel of suffering with which one must prepare the future." And to tell you how serious he was when he shared his heart in front of me with his secretary, he had just come back from the hospital where he had surgery for a benign cancer on his colon being removed. And he was, as usually when you come home from the hospital, he had lost weight. He was extremely pale. And he arrived at the car, and that day my duty was to be at the elevator, open his door, and just say, "Welcome back, Holy Father." Well, that day, obviously, I was not there alone, like the protocol is, but many other people, cardinal, bishops, priests, a few nuns, gathered there to say, "Welcome back." Well, I opened the door of the car, and his butler, Angelo Buccia, came out and came next to him helped him to get out of the car, a Mercedes. And when the Holy Father got out of the car, and he was extremely weak, and I stepped back, and he, without realizing, he put his left hand against the side of the car. At the same time, the butler closed the car door, and the Holy Father Pinky was shut into the door. And yes, he did say a couple of Polish words that then I had to go and look in the dictionary. But that's about it. He sank, he kept the pain within his persona. And then he went and greeted few people with a really bleeding pinky. And then on Sunday, from the balcony, he did the Angelus as usual, and he had the left hand pinky with a huge bandage on, and I had witnessed that suffering of him within his heart. Can you imagine if you're going to close his finger into the door after, if he's going to just say, it's okay? I kind of doubt, looking at him, that he's going to say, by the bow tie that he's wearing, I think he's going to tell you a few words more than just John Paul II also frequently demonstrated to us, God, his gratitude for our Petrine service. That is, service to the successor of Peter, and never missed the chance to express that gratitude, sometimes to the point to joking around with us. Well, one day, I was in duty again at the outside of the Aula Paolo VI. I don't know if some of you have been to Rome, but it's a huge conference hall on the left side of St. Peter Church. And that's where John Paul II used to do his audiences in winter, because in the summer they are outside on the square. My duty that day was to be at the door again and allow him to walk by, okay, and go into the car. Nothing to do, just a military salute, piece of furniture in a room, okay? Well, because who I was, obviously, I hear the Holy Father coming, arrivederci, buon appetito, all the greetings, okay? And the butler of John Paul II, Angelo, who really wanted me to date his daughter, by the way, okay? But I didn't, because I thought, it's a little bit too risky, all right? So, he sees me in my military position. He's walking 3 feet in front of the Holy Father. He arrives exactly where I am, and he elbows me with all the strength in his body, straight right under my sternum, on top of my stomach, that caused me to go down, bend down and cough, exactly when the Holy Father is right there. So I almost, ran the risk that bending down, I almost knocked over the Pope. And I bend down, I cough, and it's those nanoseconds of blindness, okay? So I get up there, and the Holy Father is right there, sees me, and says, Mario, there is no need to bow. During his pontificate, we had an extraordinary example of human greatness. First, with his apostolic vigor, and then to his witness of faithfulness. Even in his suffering and sickness, he pointed the way for us. He pointed the way for me to an authentic human growth, fully human, a growth which was not only cultural, but also economic. A growth nourished by spiritual food. John Paul II was a very special person, gifted with an enormous ability to communicate and with a brilliant intellect. Those of us who had daily contact with him, like the Swiss Guards, were always struck by the richness of his intuition, by the depth of his spirituality, the example of his prayerfulness and his immense humility, which was rooted in his intimate union with Christ. It was his humility which permitted him to continue to guide the church and to give an eloquent message even when his physical strength was failing him. One day, I was tired. I was upset. I was at the end of a 16-hour shift. I wanted out of there. I was ready to go to the Irish pub near Church of Santa Maria Maggiore to join my comrades for a beer and just put the day behind. I was very sad as well. Somehow something wasn't right with it. And so, 51 is coming. Every day the Pope has a different number as a code, okay? And so, protocol, secure everything, make sure, close that door, block the elevator, check the few offices, making sure that nobody comes in, secure the place. And the Holy Father had a very distinctive way of walking. He shuffled. He didn't do clap, clap, clap. You know, he shuffled. He had those red moccasin and he shuffled. And so it was very easy for us to, okay, it's 20 feet away, 19 feet away, 10 feet away, because of the shuffle. So, secure, I hear him, you know, okay, he's almost there, he's almost here, he's almost here. I go into my military attention, and with all my heart, I really want him to say something to me. I really wanted him to wink at me. I really wanted him to ask me what the Juventus soccer team did the night before, because he knew that I was a fan, still am, of Juventus soccer team. I wanted him to ask me, how's the weather? I wanted him to acknowledge my presence, only for half a second, but it was essential for me. Well, very close, and I'm right there, and the Holy Father comes in front of me. He's talking to two other priests, and leave. My heart broke, and I remained into the military salute, and I felt so sad, and all of a sudden, BOOM! The Holy Father right in front of me. I didn't even hear the shh, shh, shh. And right, he was about 5'6", 5'7", you know, I saw he's right in front of me, and I'm still in my military position, and he looks at me, and he says, Mario, the rosary is my favorite prayer, marvelous in its simplicity and profundity. Take my rosary, Mario. And I took it with me, and I have it in my jacket to show you. And make good use of it. Ciao. And he left. Totus tuus. A mystical Marian devotion toward that figure who all the world calls the Mother of God. It is no surprise that many of the Swiss Guard were drawn to her. Dante describes her like this in the Paradiso chapter 33, verses 13 to 16. I'm sure Peter does that in his humanities class. Lady, thou art so great and hast such worth, that if there be one who would have grace yet betaketh not himself to thee, his longing seeketh to fly without wings. The longer the Holy Father prayed, the more absorbed in the prayer he became, until he seemed completely taken up in it, as if nothing and no one in the room could pull him back from the place he had gone. One day I was in Castel Gandolfo. Castel Gandolfo, I don't know if you go to Rome for the summer program. I don't know if you been to Castel Gandolfo, which is in the Castelli Romani, but there is a Apostolic Palace there, and that's where the Pope goes in the summer. And John Paul II used to go there for 2 months every summer, and the guards go with him. And it's very relaxed and very, very, let's say, low-key, and sometimes you even see the Holy Father with his first 2 buttons open, okay, and which is pretty cool, all right? You dine with him, and we pray cards with him as well. And so one day I was at the door, and the UPS guy comes and he gives me an envelope, and he says, "This is for the Pope's secretary, Monsignor Civic." And I said, no problem. And now I signed, and I took the little package, and off I went. I climbed 2 sets of stairs, and I arrived into the Pope apartments. And my uniform, my sword, make a lot of that noise. You are a Swiss guard, you are invincible. You learn how to stay straight. Girls, actually boys, the girls don't like when you like this. You got to stay up straight. So when the Swiss guards, they're all straight because they want to prove that their sinuses and their chest, everything is open for the ladies. Okay? So my posture, I'm walking down, and I had to go down to the last door, and I had to walk in this narrow hallway with many doors on the left side. Well, I'm walking, making a lot of noise, and when I arrived at the end of this hallway, I was supposed to go to the straight door. My left eye fell into the room on the left side, and I had totally forgot that was the chapel. And so, when my eye fell in there, what did I see? John Paul II was kneeling on the floor, on the marble floor, with his right hand against the tabernacle, which was on the right side of the altar on a marble column. And he has his forehead against his right hand against the tabernacle. When I saw that, I felt my bone marrow go up and down my spine. And I just went straight into the office where Monsignor Civic was, gave him the package, and then I tiptoed away, and I did not look into the chapel again, because I was so frightened by what I've seen. There are no camera there. There's absolutely nobody. He doesn't have to do that so that people can then report it. I was very confused. But that day, later on, he was going for a walk into the Vatican garden, always up in Castel Gandolfo, and he happened to come by where I was, and he was praying the rosary, and he was alone, and I was alone, and I was not praying the rosary. But he came up to me, he looked at me, and he said only these words: "Mario, why don't you join me next time?" I was blown away. I remember clearly, my dear friends, the intensity with which he celebrated the Eucharist, how he remained deeply recollected in prayer at the conclusion of Mass, and the devotion with which he spoke spontaneously of Jesus and Mary. At the same time, he had an uncommon ability to speak to people, both privately and to a crowd, with a particular magnetism toward young people, many of whom declared themselves far from the church. About this, one particular image of this great and holy man will remain forever impressed in my memory. I'm sure that when you go to Rome, you're always going to St. Peter. And when you're going to St. Peter, for sure, you go right and you look at the Pietà of Michelangelo. Well, next to the Pietà, right to the right of the Pietà, there is a little door. And when every pope celebrates a solemn mass in the Vatican, the Pietà is closed, there is a huge curtain that they put up, okay? And the Holy Father comes down and he goes into this little room to get vestments, to get dressed, and then to be undressed. Well, was the end of, it was the beginning of Mass. He had arrived, he had dressed himself. I was not wearing my uniform that day, I was wearing my dark suit. And my job was also to make a check that that room was ready. Well, unfortunately, I was not paying attention and I thought that the Holy Father hadn't arrived yet. And so I went there and I opened the door. And when I opened the door, John Paul II was already fully dressed in that room, sitting in a chair, embracing a large crucifix about probably this, a couple of feet, just as a mother holds her baby, giving and receiving through love. I closed the door, and that day I made myself a promise. Whatever that man has, I want it. Whatever that man has, I want it. I want that spiritual food that is nourishing. I want it so badly that I'm going to do everything I can to find it with somebody else, or, God willing, with the help of the Holy Spirit. A number of times, I personally witnessed the Holy Father demonstrate that true joy is not a mere passing emotion, but comes from having met Jesus, who is true joy and true love. It was through his witness that we were continually exhorted to serve others as Christ did. He who himself came not to be served, but to serve. I also had the honor and the privilege to meet many other people who witness and demonstrate that true joy and true love comes from meeting Jesus. One day, they called me and I was into the antecamera, which is where every guest arrives before they meet with the Holy Father. And they tell me, Mother Teresa's coming. I said, oh boy. Mother Teresa has a reputation that when she comes, she's going to be in with the Holy Father for 2.5 hours, which means I'm not going to be able to leave. I'm going to have to be here for 2.5 hours waiting for her to do whatever she has to do. And soon to be, Mother Teresa arrived. Mother Teresa was very short. I'm saying for short, I would say, I don't know, 4'6", 4'7". So she entered, and I did my military salute. She barely looked at me, and she was alone, and she went into the corner of this room, and she kneeled down in prayer. When you are into that room, you are there with 2 or 3 more men called the seguiari, who are the logistic people, okay? And usually they don't talk to the guests, they want the guard to talk to the guests. So they are the one that they see the light, and when the light changes from red to green, it means the Holy Father is done, next guest. Well, they come to me and they say, it's time. So I walked, again, shoulder up, chest open, my sword. I walked toward Mother Teresa. And when I arrived in her proximity, I stopped and I almost felt so sick that I thought I was going to faint. Why? Did she smell bad? No. But she was kneeling down and her habit had uncovered her left heel. And my eye looked down at that foot, at that heel. And that heel, my little girls, was not treated like you do every single night with all of those beautiful creams for the foot and the leg and all of those things that you put on. It was a synonymous of sufferance. It was so messed up. He had traces, he had blood signs, he had scars that gave me a flashback of when I said a little bit ago that the Holy Father wanted to make his life and his message through sufferings, and that And after I recollect, I said, "Sister, it's time." She stood up, she looked at me, she unveiled, she moved her habit a little bit, and she had a bobby pin here, and on that bobby pin she had a little medal. So she opened that bobby pin, and she took her little medal off, and then she grabbed my left hand, and I had a white glove on, because that's the protocol, and she put that little medal into my left hand, and she closed my left hand. And she walked to meet with the Holy Father. Well, I lost that medal. I have absolutely no idea what I did with that medal. Probably put it into a pocket, totally forgot, thought it was coin. Gone. 4 months later, actually 6 months later, I'm in a totally different place, and again, Mother Teresa's coming again, same emotion. Oh boy, now here we go, over time. And this time she comes in and she's with 3 other nuns, so there were 4 of them. And you're familiar with nuns, and they all look alike for crying out loud. They all, they're all the same height, they wear the same habit, they all look the same age, and they talk so fast that everybody thinks, what the heck are they talking about? And the 4 of them, they came in, they barely acknowledged me, and they walked and they went into the corner of the room. And again, at a certain point, somebody comes to me and says, it's time. So I approached the sisters and I said, it's time. And, I did my military salute and I walked with them and off they went. And then all of a sudden, one of them stops, turns. I see her, it's Mother Teresa. She comes toward me. She unveils, again, she opens her little habit, bobby pin there, opens the bobby pin, takes a medal, which was Our Lady of Lourdes, takes that medal, closes the bobby pin, grabs my left hand, puts the medal into my left hand, closes my left hand, looks up at me, and says, this time, don't lose it. And walked away. I still have it. An expression I heard many times from John Paul was, be more. I'm going to repeat this. Be more. What Mario took from this teaching was to rediscover the beauty and power of my own charism, remembering that no gift given is meant for oneself, but it is given for the good of the church and her mission. Did you understand this? Remember, my dear student, that no gift given is meant for oneself, but it is given for the good of the church and her mission. In taking up the call to a new evangelization, a call near and dear to John Paul II's heart, we all, students, faculty, administration, we must receive this condition of self-giving as absolutely essential, so that we don't fall into the error of using the truth with which the Holy Spirit enlivens the church. One day I experienced the importance and the weight of one of the virtues. I had to go into the Pope's office and give him something. Well, I knocked on the door and I went into the office. And the desk of the Holy Father, very small, very humble, and next to the desk, a beautiful clock, those grandmother's clock, pendulum, the boom, moves like that. Very big, mahogany. Well, there I am, like a banana guy, dressed as the uniform with these things, within 3 feet of the Holy Father, alone with him in this room, and I had the pendulum. And the Holy Father was reading something. Well, 3 minutes go by, 5 minutes go headmaster office. He calls you in, or you have to go there because of him, and he's not paying any attention. 7 minutes go by. Well, when the 8th minute on the pendulum, went, well, I did what probably every dudette in this platea would do, which is, and the Holy Father that was reading Tolstoy, he was reading Tolstoy, put down the book, looked at me, and said, Mario, patient is a virtue. And he went back to read for another 4 minutes. That was my first encounter with patient. I felt like a piece of butter when you're trying to melt them to do the cookies, about the same, okay? But there I was. But that day, when he finally paid attention to me, he put that book down on his desk. And remember when I told you a few minutes ago, whatever that man has, I want it? Well, guess what I did? I saw which book was, and off I went to buy it. And I'm pretty sure, if you aren't, but maybe you can also ask Peter again, The Death of Ivan Ilyich. It's one of the shortest book Tolstoy has ever written. 75 pages. You can handle it, guys. You can handle it, trust me, rather than War and Peace. Okay? So, I went out. I bought that book. A couple of weeks later, night shift. I was reading the book, and the Holy Father gets up, gets dressed, and he walks by, and I put the book down. I put the book down on my little table. He saw the book, and he told me, Mario, Tolstoy's book is about many things. The terrible weak spots of the human heart, the primacy and elision of death. But more than anything, it is about the consequences of living without meaning, that is, without truth, and without an abiding connection to one's life. Mario, be always for the whole truth, even when it hurts. And he walked away. My dear students, John Paul, and I'm concluding, impacted my young life in profound ways, laying the groundwork for my becoming a better husband, a better father, a better businessman, a better teacher, but most importantly, a better practicing Catholic. It was his example that inspired me. It was his words that gave me hope. And it was his ideas that provided direction to my life. Once you leave here, the next time you feel lost, ask John Paul II to show you the way. Thank you very much.